The question isn't why am I binge eating or overindulging? The question is where am I restricting either mentally or physically in order to have that reaction of the quote overindulging?
Welcome to the Live Unrestricted podcast, a show where you'll learn how to heal your relationship with food and your body so that you can focus your time and energy on more important things like your personal growth. I'm your host, Sabrina Magna, food freedom coach, and my mission is to help make your life happier and healthier without stress, overwhelm, or guilt about food. If you love the show, please do go out and share it. And if you're looking for support with your relationship with food, details about my programs are in the show notes. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now let's jump in. We're back. This is our part 2 of my Q&A with Victoria Kleinsman, the absolutely amazing food freedom and body love coach. If you don't know her, she's been on the podcast plenty of times before because we love doing episodes together. I'm a guest on her podcast, the Body Love Binge podcast, so definitely make sure to check it out. Victoria is an eating disorder and abuse survivor, food freedom and body love coach, speaker, podcast host, and writer, and her purpose is to guide you on a journey to discover food freedom, cultivate a loving relationship with your body, and most importantly, fall in love with yourself. Can I get an amen? That is what this podcast is all about. So if you haven't listened to part 1 yet, make sure that you check it out. It was last week's episode, and we talked about the set point weight theory, how to know when you are at your healthy, sustainable, maintainable weight, what that looks like for you specifically. We talked about eating disorder recovery content and just personal development as a whole, and when it can actually start being too much, unhelpful, and coming from the wrong place. It was such a good conversation. And today we're talking about how to handle social situations where food is involved. If you've ever experienced this, where you feel stress or anxiety leading into a birthday party or a wedding or any kind of celebration where you know there's going to be a sweets table and you're afraid that you're going to be fixated on it the entire time. Like you can't have conversations where you're fully focused with the person in front of you because either you're mentally calculating how many calories you've already eaten, or you're afraid of eating a cookie because it might turn into 5, or you're feeling bad because you had a piece of pizza. This is something that I am so familiar with. And if you've ever struggled with your relationship with food, there's a really good chance that you've experienced this anxiety around social events as well. So we're going to talk to you about how to handle that, how to listen to your body, how to be present, how to be at a social event without feeling like food is the central focus. We're also going to talk about binge eating, guilt and shame, and how to reduce and even get rid of that guilt and shame after you've overindulged on certain foods. And if you've ever felt like when you're around people, maybe it's friends or family, and they're eating quote unquote bad foods, right? So they might be drinking their calories through a milkshake or soda, or they might be eating chips or sweets. And when you're around them, you feel okay. Like you're able to eat those foods and you don't feel as stressed out. But the thought of eating those foods alone when you're not around people is a completely different story. And you don't understand why. There's this lack of trust. There's this stress when you're with those foods alone. And you want to be able to have a more positive, balanced, consistent relationship with foods that you love. Then that's one of the questions that we answer as well. So I'm going to go and play part 2 of this Q&A. Enjoy. All right, next question. I have a few, but I'm trying to think about which one I want to go to. So let's talk about this one. What advice do you have for navigating social situations or events where there's a lot of focus on food without feeling anxious or being afraid of binge eating?
Okay, well, first of all, regardless of the event that's coming up, are you doing the work ultimately day to day to recover? Because of course you can't just do something different in one day and be fine. Because am I hearing the question right? It's an event that encompasses food.
Yes, so I think this is really coming from the standpoint of someone who feels like every time they go to a dinner party or a wedding or something where there's food around, I know that for me, that was super triggering for me. I would feel
Yes.
anxious. I would be afraid of losing control. I would have a hard time focusing on conversations because I was like, oh, there's a sweets table in the corner. So,
Oh, yeah.
how to handle these situations, I think, more in a way that you're present and the food is not the center of your attention, like you're able to enjoy it and be present and have conversations with people.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying. Well, first of all, unless you are nourishing yourself day to day anyway, unless, like I said, you're doing the work to have a free relationship with food, you're going to be food obsessed. Because if you're mentally restricting and or physically restricting, you're going to be hyper focused on food, and that's all there is to it. And because I always like both, and you can support yourself through situations like this by taking a moment before the event to be like, right, what's important to me when I go to this wedding party? Let's just say it's a wedding party. When I go to this wedding today or this evening, okay, so let's say what's important to you is to be present with the people around you, to enjoy the company, to dance, to let your hair down, and to enjoy the food unrestrictedly. So get clear on what's important to you before you go, and then give yourself full permission to eat and drink whatever is there and practice tuning into your body, because the problem is if you're restricting physically or mentally in general anyway, there either is going to be the I'm scared of the buffet, keep me away from it, or the fuck it button gets pressed. You eat everything that's not nailed down that you don't even want to eat because you're starting your diet again tomorrow, and you're in a shame spiral, and you and I both know how that goes. So I would say give yourself a bit of space between your reaction when you go to reach the food. Do you want it? Can you enjoy it as much as possible? Remind yourself you're not going to restrict tomorrow, and self-soothe with your self-talk. Self-talk is very powerful and very impactful. So notice what thoughts are going through your head if you're afraid of the buffet table, and remind yourself with loving words of affirmations like, it's just food. It's okay. I'm not going to restrict tomorrow. This meal's not going to kill me. Like whatever you need to do, and write these down beforehand so you can support yourself and you're prepared. But ultimately, the work needs to be done in and around the event, because if you're still restricting or you're not working through overcoming your fear of weight gain, you're going to be food focused. So I hope that's, helpful, but you do need to be doing the work as well in the
Yes.
meantime.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a few things to kind of give my spin on. So you mentioned the first thing, which is to make sure you're nourishing yourself all throughout the day, because a lot of the times when we think about binge eating, especially at night, we think of it as a night problem. A lot of the
Mm.
times it has to do with what's going on during the day. And I know for me, I used to, like, if I knew I had an event at night, I would have the mentality of I'm going to save up my calories today. So I'm going to eat
Same.
a low carb kind of day. I'm going to eat a low calorie kind of day. And it's the same thing as like, as if you went an entire week without sleeping well and you took like 2 hours a night. And then at the end of that week, you need to sleep for 14 hours. Like your body is in deficit. And so the
Yeah.
same thing happens if you have the mentality of I need to save up my calories, and that can be really triggering for you. I know that it feels uncomfortable, but eating normally, like eating the same way that you normally would during the day. And for me, what has been really helpful is that let's say I had a dinner at 6 p.m. In the past, what I would do is maybe I would skip my snack and I would have my lunch, but then I would go to the event and I'd be like really, really hungry. And so now I always ask myself, and this comes back to self-awareness and knowing yourself. I know when I'm hungry, I am not my best self. I am just excited to get food on my plate. I'm not really like I'm not fully present. I'm not my most authentic self. And it's how human behaviors is. It's you focus on getting your needs met. And so I
Yeah.
always ask myself, even if it's like 5 p.m., okay, I'm already hungry. How will I be an hour from now? or an hour and a half, 2 hours until I get food. And because I know myself and I want to be able to show up as my best self, I'll have a snack because of the kind of person I want to be for the people around me, because of the kind of experiences I want to have. And this goes back to what you said about what's important. What's important to me is the way that I show up, the experiences that I have, the memories that I make. And I'm so thankful because now I feel like I'm able to remember things so much more clearly. Like I look back on some of the events that I used to go to. I look back on my sister's baby shower, the first time I was ever becoming an aunt, and I was really deeply struggling with my eating disorder. I don't remember the conversations I had. I don't remember the people I met. All I remember is being by the food table the entire day, running between the bathroom and the food table. And that makes me really sad. And now when I meet people, I remember their job, I remember their age, I remember who they are. So that's what's really important to me.
Because you're able to be more present because your mind's not fixated on the food, right?
Exactly.
For sure. And
Yeah.
also, I want to point out that you need to be working on your body image, your self-love in general, your worthiness, because I remember I would not eat the entire day if I was going out in the evening. So my tummy could be as flat as possible, depending on what I would wear. And so, because I was so afraid of judgment and bloating and weight gain, whatever that meant, unless I healed that at the root, even though I was changing my food behaviors to support me, it's never going to change long term unless you're really diving into, okay, well, why am I so afraid of weight gain? Why am I so afraid of judgment? So we need to be taking such a holistic approach to recovery in general.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, right. What question shall I choose next? Okay, love this one. I feel safe when other people eat or drink calories, especially candy. Why is this?
Okay, I feel safe when other people eat or drink calories. Why is
Yeah,
this?
so what I'm hearing her say is, say if I was in the eating disorder and I was with you and
Hmm.
we were having a girls' night and you were eating the popcorn, the candy, the
Yeah.
chocolate, I would then feel, I want to use the word permission
Yeah.
to then do the same.
Yeah.
Whereas if I was on my own, I would have such a big block around perhaps doing that.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's because you feel like you have permission. If other people are doing it, then that means it's okay and you have that permission. And I would say if you're having a really hard time doing that when you're alone, then a lot of it comes down to the way that you are talking to yourself, and your permission is not unconditional, and it is conditional on the circumstances or the time of the day or what you've eaten that day or who you're around. And so if that's the case, then I would really work towards that unconditional permission. And this goes hand in hand with having that holistic view, because it's really hard to give yourself unconditional permission to eat if you're still deeply struggling with your body image. And I think that when you're around people, it's easier to kind of shut that voice up, that body image voice up, that fear that is so loud when you're alone. So I would say that if we're to dive really deep into the root cause, it's okay, where is the work that needs to be done on that self-love and that unconditional permission, not just to eat, but to let my body do what it needs to do to be at its healthy weight.
Exactly. And I think it also points to self-trust, doesn't it? Because an example for myself during recovery, I was allowing, in quotes, myself to eat pizza, sweets, things like that, but only if I was doing it with friends.
Mm,
So it was giving myself permission because someone else was, and that made me feel like it was safe to do so. I didn't allow myself to do it by myself because I labeled that as binge eating or whatever it might be. And also trusting yourself. So if you have trust that this is what my body wants and needs, regardless of who's around me, whether you want it or not, it takes away the needing to have permission if you trust yourself and your needs. So I think it's leaning into self-trust and how you can build your self-trust within yourself, not just around food, but within everything.
yeah.
So a question for this person is, to journal on this. How can you learn and support yourself to trusting yourself more in general and see what comes up?
Yeah, yeah, that's such a good point because I know I used to not keep any junk, I say air quotes for anyone who doesn't see this, junk food in the house because I didn't want to be at risk of eating that when I'm alone because that's when that trust would completely, there was no trust there. And it was like, I know that if I start eating, I'm never going to stop and I'm not going to feel the judgment or the eyes of other people on me. And so I'm just going to, the floodgates are going to open and I'm going to eat everything. So a lot of it does come from self-trust. And I would also say, like, if you notice that you're only able to eat those foods around people, chances are you're not allowing yourself to eat those foods alone. Maybe you're
Yeah.
not bringing those foods into your house. Maybe those are like special occasion foods. So actually practice eating those foods alone and being really mindful. Like that's where you want to implement those mindful eating techniques because a lot of the times we're not present with our food, we're not tasting our food, we're not tuning in to how it makes us feel, we're not allowing ourselves to slow down because we're like, I just want to get it in and out as soon as possible. So allowing yourself to practice that skill on your own, because when you can do that on your own, it actually becomes easier to do it around people.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. Okay. So, can you share tips for overcoming guilt and shame associated with eating, especially after overindulging in certain foods?
Okay, so guilt is a sign of you thinking you've done something wrong. So guilt's an emotion that is helpful. Let's say you, hopefully no one listening would do this, but let's say you pushed an old woman over and stealed a shopping bag or something. I want you to feel guilty for that because guilt would then perhaps you would go and apologize, make it right, learn from it, whatever. But when we feel guilt around food, it's and I remember this feeling, it's like you've done something innately wrong. Like you've done something as bad as like rob an old woman or something.
Hmm.
So I would question and again get your journal out because a lot comes up when you're writing. I feel guilty. Guilt is a sign that I've done something wrong. What is it exactly I've done wrong? Okay, let's say this person says eating a lot of food or overindulging, I think the words they used,
Hmm.
was something that they see as wrong. I would ask them to actually question that. Imagine if that was in a courtroom and they were proving that, quote, overindulging was actually was actually, hold on, the opposite of the question, what I'm saying here. Why is overindulging not wrong? And
Yeah.
see what comes through. Maybe the person can think of something, maybe not. And that's when a coach is helpful or just asking us in the DMs. Because, in my opinion, what does overindulging even mean? Does it mean eating past fullness? Does it mean going over an arbitrary line that this person has created? Then over this line, it's not okay. And under the line, it's okay. Where have you learned that? Most primarily from diet culture. So, what does overindulging even mean? And then let's say it was like not listening to the body, eating past fullness, not feeling great. I'm curious as to why that's happened because the question isn't why am I binge eating or overindulging? The question is where am I restricting, either mentally or physically, in order to have that reaction of the quote overindulging? And then you've got another holistic approach of is overindulging you in a way that you're attempting to try and get pleasure or peace or relaxation into your life? Like, where perhaps else can you be adding in whatever indulgence means to you? You know,
Hmm.
because for me, when I still do this every night, but when I used to binge eat this way, I would sit by myself with a lot of chocolate. It wasn't just the chocolate, it wasn't just the diet mentality I was rebelling against. It was the need to just be in my own space and relax because I wasn't allowing myself to relax in the day for 10 minutes even.
Yeah.
So there's so much here. So I need the person in front of me to like ask what all of that means to them. But have you got anything to add from what I've shared?
Yeah, so there's so many ways that you can approach this, right? Because like there's so much behind it. So one of the things that you mentioned is like this is actually a really good opportunity to get curious as to like, okay, What's the root cause of this? Is this trying to teach me something? Another thing that I would say is when the guilt and the shame feels really, really heavy, like almost all consuming, a lot of the times is because you're making it mean something about you as a person, as like your character. So a lot of the times the guilt and the shame, if you dive deeper, it's going to be something, a language, a self-talk that's going to sound like, what is wrong with me? Or
Yeah.
I am a failure. You generalize one situation, one event to your internal being. And then you start feeling like you are broken as a human being. And so what I would say is I really like making my clients journal on what are some of the core beliefs that you hold about yourself? Like, I'm a failure. I can't stick to anything. I always give up. Because what happens is if you hold on to this belief, and no one's waking up and thinking, today I'm going to think I'm a failure. Like, these are all things that are happening subconsciously. But when you start bringing awareness to that, the way that your brain works is that it always works on confirmation bias. It
Yeah.
wants to show you evidence and show you proof of these beliefs that you hold about yourself. And so when a situation like overindulging happens, what it does, your brain will latch onto that and say, see, this is evidence that you're broken, that you're a failure, that you can't stick to anything. And so I would dive deeper and question those core beliefs that you hold. For example, if you believe that you're a failure, pretend that you're going to court and that you have to challenge this belief. Is it true that you are a failure 100% of the time? And are there other areas of your life that you can see and that you can notice where you haven't failed? Maybe you have an amazing family, you are a great mom, you have a great career, you're a really great sister. And once you start challenging this belief that you're a failure, what you'll start to see is that you're able to handle these situations differently because it's no longer a meaning about who you are. You're able to detach yourself and look at it from like a scientist of like, oh, that's interesting. Like that happened. And what can I learn from it? It doesn't mean anything about me. What can I learn from this? How can I experiment? How can I make changes? Because it's not as heavy and as emotional anymore.
Definitely. And like you said, guilt is feeling like you've done something wrong. Shame or feeling ashamed is feeling like there's something wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
And this links back to, again, 99% sure on this with regarding to how the question was asked, fear of weight gain.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of shame there. And that's not just linked to fear of weight gain and body image. It's linked to stuff in childhood about why are you not okay to authentically be you in whatever body size that is. So there's a lot of deep work to do here. But
Mm-hmm.
it is a case of being open to doing that work, journaling, asking the right questions, reaching out to me or Sabrina. And like you said, noticing what thoughts are going on in your head, building evidence against your belief. And then last thing I will share about Byron Katie's work, which I'm sure you've heard
Yeah,
of Byron
of
Katie, yeah.
course.
So
Yeah.
she has those incredible questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I invite the listener to look up Byron Katie. She's got loads of free stuff on her website. You can ask yourself these questions around the limiting beliefs, such as I'm a failure because I've overindulged. Go through those questions. We're running out of time, else I would ask them now. And then that really supported me throughout my recovery because like Byron Katie says, you don't release the thought just releases you, and you find like a space of peace when you've done the exercises that she suggests that you do.
Yeah. Do I have time to add one more thing?
Yeah, I'm okay for time. I wasn't sure
Oh
if
no,
you wanted.
I'm okay for time too. I was like, I know that we're
Okay,
gonna
cool.
run long. One metaphor that has been really helpful for me and for my clients when it comes to that guilt is because a lot of the times diet culture has made you believe that you need to eat healthy, quote unquote, of course, quote unquote healthy 100% of the time. And so
Yeah.
the way that I would encourage you to start looking at it is you don't work 24/7. Like you have nights off, you have weekends off, you have vacations, because what would happen if you didn't have that time off? You would burn out. within a
Yeah.
couple of days or a couple of weeks. At first, when you start working, you might be able to do that for a couple of weeks. And then as you burn out every single time, that burnout is going to happen faster and faster and faster. And so there's a reason why we are intentional about having that time away from work, because we actually notice that when we get back to work, I don't know about you, but like after the weekend where I've had some time to recharge and to decompress and disconnect, you have a fresh mind and you're more focused and you're more productive. And so we never look at that rest time as, well, unless you have an unhealthy relationship with work, you don't feel guilty about it because you know that it's necessary, because you would burn out without it. And so the exact same concept and idea can be applied to food. You might notice that if you're not intentional about having those fun foods, those foods that might not have the function of nourishing your body, but they have the function of giving you happiness and joy and of just being enjoyed, like nourishing your mind, then you'll notice that being intentional about having those in your life, you won't experience that quote unquote burnout, which is a binge, because you'll notice that over time, those binges tend to happen more frequently, because the same way that if you don't take time away from work, you will burn out faster, more often. So actually, it's in your best interest to be intentional about including those foods that are there to bring you joy, because without it, you're most likely to fall off the wagon.
Absolutely. It's like sex, right? And yes, I'm bringing food and sex into the same conversation. If we only had sex when we wanted to make a baby, so I am not going through my entire life without having sex. Good luck with that.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm
So,
scared.
oh, he agrees with me, clearly. He agrees with me. So,
You're
with
too.
regards to food, it's pleasurable. We have taste buds for a reason. So if we're only eating to nourish our bodies for physical performance or to get the quote perfect amount of macros and nutrients in, we're forgetting the point of pleasure as well. So it's okay to eat chocolate just for the sake of the pleasure of eating chocolate. It's okay to eat food if you're not particularly hungry physically for it, it's okay. And like you said, intentionally adding that in on purpose can create that natural holistic balance of a healthy, happy relationship with food. And you're not going from one end of the spectrum to the other.
Yeah, 100%. Like when you remove this sense that you're doing something wrong and you're actually
Yes.
intentional about it, because a lot of that feeling of guilt and shame comes from feeling like you slipped, like you were
Yeah.
doing so good and then you slipped or you fell, where it's like, no, if I actually intentionally took that step, then I personally feel like that guilt and that shame becomes a lot less strong.
Because you can own that shit. Like if you're on a wagon, you're gonna fall off it. If you burn the fucking wagon, there is no wagon. And if you want to eat a tub of Ben and Jerry's, own that shit, enjoy it, eat it, and move on with your life. You
Hmm.
know?
Yeah. And the last thing I will say on this is become aware of the language that you use.
Yes.
Language holds power. It holds emotion. It holds energy. And so I'm always really mindful. I'm sure that you do this with your clients as well. Whenever I hear language that is like diet culture language, like I have a weekly check-in for my clients. And when I see like, I need to get back on track or I fell off or any of those words, when you become intentional about being aware of the language, the words that you use, they carry frequency. And so
Yeah.
diet culture language, if you like visualize someone constantly like getting back on track, then getting back on track inherently means like, okay, I'm back to restricting, or I'm back to like making it my 100% full-time focus to eat quote unquote healthy or to be on my plan. And so become aware, and you can even have like someone in your life start calling you out on it. Like you can tell your partner, if it's someone that you trust, of course, or a best friend, or if you're working with a coach, is like, I know for me, I am not aware all the times of the language that I use. And sometimes I'll get on a coaching call with my coach and she'll be like, you're using a lot of pressure words. Like I need,
Mhm.
I have
Yeah.
to. And
I should.
I should, yeah. And I don't notice this on my own, and I'm able to do it with my clients because, of course, we have blind spots within ourselves. So sometimes having someone call you out on the words that you're using, even just that subtle shift, that subtle
Yeah.
awareness can be really powerful.
That's so key. And okay, last thing then we will, because we can go on forever.
I know.
With that, like even if they're like intuitive eating and they're saying, I'm going to get back on track with intuitive eating, they're putting themselves on an intuitive eating wagon, which in my opinion is the intuitive eating diet,
Mhm.
because dieting is not an action, it's a state of mind. So notice what language you're using. We don't like to not have a clear step by step, black or white, because again, it comes back to self-trust.
Mhm.
Trust your body, trust yourself, reach out for help, notice what thoughts and language you're using, and choose things that serve you and create freedom and love instead of control and, restriction.
I think that's a really great place to end it. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. We could go on forever and we will do more of these again. We had great feedback, so let us know if you would like us to, because it's so easy. We put a question box, we have loads of questions. We have no idea what the questions are. We
No.
speak through our wisdom and knowledge, and it's really fun. So
And it
let us
gives
know.
us an opportunity to talk every couple of months.
Exactly. And we love that. So thank you for
Yeah.
hearing us. Thank you for your questions. Sabrina, thank you for collaborating with me and making this happen. And I love you loads.
Same to you. And as always, send us a DM with more questions. We'll start gathering them up now so that we can have our next Q&A. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being here, Victoria. I so appreciate you.
You too. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found it valuable, I would love if you would share it with someone you know that could benefit. If you're loving the show, don't forget to subscribe over on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. I really love hearing feedback from you, so please leave a rating and review over on Apple to help us get in the ears of more people who need it the most. Finally, come hang out with me on Instagram at Sabrina Magna Health for more educational content and get up close and personal with me. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next episode.